12 British television legends, millions of viewers, decades of fame, and almost every one of them died with next to nothing. Today we're counting down the British TV icons who filled our living rooms for years, then vanished into poverty the moment the cameras stopped rolling. Swindled by the people paid to protect them, bankrupted by tax bills nobody explained, or simply forgotten by an industry that stopped paying once the applause died down. One name on this list spent his final months in a nursing home paid for by strangers, after friends discovered he'd been living off charity in a single rented room, his savings gone, his body failing. He had made an entire country laugh for 40 years. He had shared a stage with Hollywood royalty. It took a benefit concert organized by the people who loved him to keep him from dying completely alone, and his story isn't even the most heartbreaking one here. Stay to the end, because number one is the one that stays with you the longest. These are the stars who had everything and lost it all. Wilfred Brambell. Wilfred Brambell's face was among the most recognizable on British television. As the elder half of Steptoe and Son, he turned a scruffy rag-and-bone man into a character many still rank among the BBC's greatest comic creations. He even played Paul McCartney's grandfather in the Beatles' first film. Millions knew his face. Almost nobody knew the man. Away from the character, though, was a private, complicated life that had unraveled behind the scenes. A broken marriage, a public arrest that could have ended his career overnight, years of heavy drinking. When he died in January 1985, only 6 people came to his cremation. 6. For a man who had once been watched by 20 million viewers a week. He gave the nation one of its favorite double acts. In the end, he couldn't fill a room. But loneliness is only the beginning. Number 11 lost everything to a man she trusted completely. Fenella Fielding. Fenella Fielding had one of the most seductive, distinctive voices in British comedy, the smoky-voiced vamp of Carry On Screaming, a serious stage actress who impressed Fellini and Noel Coward in the same career. At her peak, she was among the most in-demand performers in the country. But while she was busy building that career, her agent was busy dismantling it from behind the scenes, quietly siphoning off her earnings for years. By the time Fielding worked out what was happening, the money was gone. She had to sell her home. She went on the dole, a star of stage and screen, queuing for unemployment benefit like anyone else. She eventually rebuilt her career and her life. But, for a long stretch, one of Britain's most glamorous actresses had absolutely nothing to show for her success, because someone else had already spent it. Number 10 drank away her fear of being forgotten. Yootha Joyce. Millions knew her as Mildred Roper, the sharp-tongued, socially aspiring wife who became a defining figure of British sitcom history, first in Man About the House, then in her own spin-off, George and Mildred. Audiences adored Yootha Joyce. Nobody around her realized how much she was struggling. Joyce had been drinking half a bottle of brandy a day for over 10 years, terrified of being trapped forever inside a character she never wanted to become. Her lawyer later said she had become a victim of her own success. She kept working almost until the end, filming a George and Mildred film just weeks before she died, because stopping meant confronting a life that, behind the fame, had become desperately lonely and financially precarious. She died having given the nation years of laughter and having privately lost the fight with something the nation never saw. Number 9 was dropped by the very franchise that made him famous, and it broke him completely. Charles Hawtrey. Charles Hawtrey appeared in 23 Carry On films, more than almost anyone else in the franchise. For a generation of British filmgoers, his twitchy, delicate comic energy was inseparable from the entire series. His drinking, which had always simmered beneath the surface, gradually became impossible to work around. Producer Peter Rogers had to sober him up with black coffee before every scene. After Carry On Abroad in 1972, he was unceremoniously dropped from the franchise that had made him famous. He retreated to a small cottage on the Kent coast, drank, grew increasingly isolated, and watched his income and his circle of friends shrink together. When he died in 1988, his funeral was attended by only a handful of people. The man who made millions laugh for 2 decades spent his final years mostly forgotten, in a house that was falling apart around him. Number 8 was swindled out of a fortune and never fully recovered his confidence. Frankie Howerd. Frankie Howerd was among the biggest comedy stars in Britain in the early 1950s, a radio phenomenon, a Royal Variety performance regular, a household name. It felt like nothing could stop him. His career collapsed almost overnight when television exposed a nervous, unpolished side of his act audiences weren't ready for. At the same time, his manager was secretly siphoning off his earnings to fund a failed wrestling promotion, leaving Howerd facing a mountain of unpaid tax on money he'd never actually gotten to keep. He suffered a breakdown, and for years scraped by in seaside panto and half-empty clubs, a star reduced to arguing over billing with a ventriloquist's dummy. He clawed his way back years later with Up Pompeii, but the years of ruin in between nearly finished him for good. Number 7 was betrayed by a system that never planned to pay him fairly. Patrick Troughton. Patrick Troughton took over as the second Doctor Who in 1966, and, by daring to reinvent the role entirely, arguably saved the entire series. Decades later, fans still consider his performance one of the finest in the show's history. Troughton, though, had 2 families to support financially, and in the era before repeat fees and residuals were properly established, television work simply didn't pay the way people assumed it did. According to his son's own biography of him, the constant pressure to earn enough ground him down for years. He kept working conventions and guest roles well into his 60s, not for nostalgia, but because he needed the money. In March 1987, at a science fiction convention in Georgia, his heart, weakened by years of financial and professional strain, finally gave out. He died 2 days after his 67th birthday, still working. Number 6 was legally bankrupted while he was thousands of miles from home. Robert Newton. Every stereotypical pirate voice in film owes something to Robert Newton. His Long John Silver in Disney's Treasure Island was so influential that his exaggerated West Country "R" became the template for pirates in film and television for the rest of the century. Newton's drinking was legendary, even by the standards of 1950s show business. He would arrive on set intoxicated, get fired, and drink through the unemployment that followed. In 1954, while he was overseas filming, he was formally declared bankrupt back in London, over £46,000 in unpaid taxes, alongside debts to a string of other creditors. Sporadic work followed, but the damage to his health and reputation never really healed. A heart attack killed him in 1956, aged just 50, having spent almost everything he'd ever earned trying to outrun his own addiction. Number 5 never got the chance to build any security at all. Richard Beckinsale. Richard Beckinsale was, by every account, on his way to becoming a defining performer of his generation. As Lenny Godber in Porridge and Alan Moore in Rising Damp, he had the kind of easy charm that made writers want to build shows around him. And then, on the night of March 18, 1979, an undiagnosed heart condition killed him in his sleep. He was only 31. He left behind roughly £65,000 in his will, a modest sum for a star of his stature, and after inheritance tax, his family was left with barely £18,000 of it. His young daughters, including a 5-year-old who would grow up to become the actress Kate Beckinsale, were left with a fraction of the financial security most people assume comes with fame. He simply hadn't had the time to build any more. Number 4 watched his own career collapse in slow motion and drank to survive it. Tony Hancock. Tony Hancock's Half Hour made him arguably the nation's favorite comic performer during the 1950s, pulling in enormous radio and television audiences with a character built entirely around ordinary disappointment. Hancock's perfectionism curdled into paranoia over time. He fired the writers who had built his success, fell deeper into alcoholism, and watched his bookings shrink year after year until a once unmissable star was reduced to chasing work in Australia on a shoestring television deal, living in a rented flat far from everyone he knew. In June 1968, alone and depressed, he took his own life. His note read simply, "Things just seem to go wrong too many times." He was only 44. Number 3 was bankrupted by a husband who never told her the truth. Diana Dors. Britain's biggest female film star of the 1950s was Diana Dors, a blonde bombshell with beauty, fame, and, everyone assumed, a fortune to match. But her first husband, Dennis Hamilton, had spent years running up debts in her name while controlling every penny she earned. When their marriage collapsed, Dors was left to personally shoulder the wreckage, later testifying that she'd been forced to sign away assets at the point of a gun. She spent years touring cabaret just to pay her divorce lawyers. She rebuilt her fortune more than once, but poor decisions and bad advisors kept draining it away. When she died of cancer in 1984, her estate was worth a small fraction of what the public assumed a star of her fame must have had. Number 2 was slowly stolen from by the people closest to her. Hilda Baker, touring the variety halls from the age of 10. Hilda Baker built a career from nothing before becoming one of British television's biggest female comedians in Nearest and Dearest. At her peak, she owned a large house, drove expensive cars, and lived like the star she'd become. Her later years unraveled cruelly. A car accident left her partly disabled, and a driver she trusted embezzled thousands of pounds from her, of which barely a fraction was ever recovered. Worse, the earliest signs of what would become severe dementia appeared while she was still working, forcing her to rely on cue cards just to remember her own lines. By the time she died in 1986, less than 10 people attended her funeral. The woman who had once filled Britain's biggest theatres died in poverty in a psychiatric hospital, largely alone. Number 1 is the one you won't be able to shake. Terry Thomas. Terry Thomas was the quintessential English bounder, the cigarette holder, the gap-toothed grin, the catchphrase, "You're an absolute shower." He starred in some of the most successful British and international comedies of the 1950s and 60s, worked alongside Peter Sellers and Jack Lemmon, and became instantly recognizable around the world. Diagnosed with Parkinson's disease in 1971, he watched the illness dismantle his career, piece by piece, over the following 2 decades, and he spent almost everything he had left on medical treatment. By the late 1980s, he and his wife had sold nearly everything they owned and were living in a charity-provided flat, surviving on support from the Actors Benevolent Fund. He had once commanded some of the highest fees in British comedy. Now he depended on the kindness of strangers just to eat. By 1989, word of his situation had reached old friends and colleagues, who organized a benefit concert at Drury Lane. Phil Collins headlined, Michael Caine hosted. It raised enough money to move him into a proper nursing home for his final months. He died there in January 1990, aged 78, just months after finally being shown, one more time, how loved he really was. 12 stars who filled our screens, our living rooms and our childhoods, and 12 reminders that fame was never a guarantee of security. Swindling managers, broken tax systems, addiction, illness, sudden death with no time to prepare. Industries that simply stopped paying once the cameras moved on. The causes were all different. The ending was the same. If this moved you the way it moved us researching it, hit like, share it with someone who grew up watching these faces, and subscribe for more of these stories, because the people who gave us so much deserve, at the very least, to be remembered honestly.